Hello and welcome to Tree Forages and Browse for Livestock Year-Round, continued learning at Three Streams Farm with Shana Hanson at NOFA New Hampshire's Winter Conference. I'm Laura Andrews, NOFA New Hampshire's Program Coordinator, and I'll be hosting this session with Julie Davidson, NOFA New Hampshire Board Member. First, please note that we're recording this session and all sessions throughout the conference. Many of the recordings are available to watch now, and you'll find those links on the same page that you've been using to access these sessions on our website. And the rest of the recordings from today should be available within the next week or so. For technical issues or for instructions on how to access closed captions, please feel free to communicate publicly through the chat or message me directly here or through NOFA-NH. I would get either of those messages. And before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that this conference is taking place on the land of the Pennacook tribe or Endakina, the Abenaki word for the traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki and Wabanaki peoples past and present. And we acknowledge and honor with gratitude the land and waterways and the Alnobak or people who have stewarded this land through the generations. And now I'll introduce Shana Hanson of Three Streams Farm. Shana, I muted you. So
there's a problem because you have this thing up that's white, and so I have to put no, I'm not muted, right? Okay, there we go. Thank you. Because I was like having to cover the screen because it had a white thing on it. So hi everybody, I'm Shana from Three Streams Farm and Belfast Blueberry Cooperative in Belfast, Maine. And I'm going to whiz through 40 minutes of pictures and ideas. And I'm going to ask you to jot your questions down as we go, either in the chat so that Laura can collect them, or on paper so that you can say them verbally. We're going to make sure to save 20 minutes at the end, which I think should hopefully cover most of our attempts at answering your questions. And so during the presentation, I have like 80 slides, and I hope you enjoy the pictures, and I'll answer the questions at the end. So share screen. Share. Tree Forages and Browse. Is that working? Can I hear anyone? Can someone say they're there?
Yes, and it's
okay.
Working.
Okay. Tree Forages and Browse for Livestock Year-Round. Continued learning from my farm. It's not working. When I push the arrow, it doesn't change pages. My PDF isn't changing pages.
Can you click on it with your mouse and then try again?
Okay. Farming trees can repair the climate. That's my cowie tulip with the late cut ash from the big tree that's next to her with the ladder against it. I don't know if you can see. Green plants are constantly exporting heat energy from the sun. The infrared energy comes down, and it takes really a lot of energy to make water into water vapor. And so they use that energy to make the water vapor. And you know how when water boils, it takes a long time at the end and just keeps trying and trying, and finally it boils. That's because it has to collect that energy to make the bonds of the water vapor. So the water vapor goes mostly up. Some of it goes down to equalize temperatures like dew on a cool morning, but most of it goes up like 2 kilometers, and where it condenses is where the heat gets released, and it gets released up there to become rain. The heat doesn't come down in the rain, the heat dissipates way up there. So they're constantly moving heat energy away from the surface of the planet. And thus trees moderate temperatures. I'm having to remember what these slides say because there's these icons across the top that are blocking part of my slide. So that's Lily's mulberry tree that I prune sometimes. It's the most magnificent mulberry tree I've ever been in. And my cow's yoke is made from a dead branch from that tree. Trees are intimately involved in the rain cycles. They release bacteria that coalesce haze droplets into raindrops. and they pump air across the continent just from their evapotranspiration that causes a vacuum and pulls air towards them. And that's how there's rain in interiors of continents. Without enough forests, the small rain cycles are broken, and now we have more droughts and floods. We're stripping too many live surfaces. That's probably 90% of the climate issue, and the carbon layer in the sky is a smaller, has a smaller power over it than the plant cover. So trees regulate soil moisture, and they enrich the soil with their leaves and their ramial wood that they drop. And also, if you're pruning them as pollards, these are old pollards that have lapsed for 100 years in the Basque country in France. I was there for clopatrons. I was a speaker for 10 minutes. And anyway, when you prune the trees, the roots die back and regrow as the tree regrows. So each time they die back and regrow, they're adding layers of carbon underground, which, yes, it's sequestration. It also is supporting all kinds of soil life and releasing nitrogen as those roots, little root hairs rot. It releases nitrogen to the ground layer. Ingvild Austad says they didn't have to manure the hayfields when they had enough pollards in them. And also the leaf drop is supporting soil life. If you notice in the droughts, there will be better grass under the trees. And that's not only about the shade, that's also because the life there in the soil is staying alive and holding the moisture and functioning. So the archaeological sign of animal-based husbandry, as in Neolithic times when people were wandering with dairy and meat animals, is no soil erosion. As soon as you have biennial and annual agriculture, they see soil erosion in the archaeological record. Eating from trees is normal. This guy is in Nepal in recent years. They're still doing 90% of animal fodder from tall trees in the mountains of Nepal. And Carol Kamala Kinsey took that picture. She lives nearby here. She's quite involved in projects in Nepal. And this is a guy in 1953 in Switzerland. The Alps behind him looks like he came home from the office and either didn't have time to get a ladder or it's too high. He looks just kind of like how I am sometimes. And this is my farm, and that's Annie Mae Brittany Turner carrying beech to my animals. And I actually was next to her with another load. This is in Austria, and the guy used his pack frame to climb an ash pollard, and that's all from one tree. This is Sweden, and that's a stack of sheaves of leaves with the twigs, with the branches, and they're probably about a meter long, and there's a hollow down the middle with a pole. There's probably some wood or boughs at the bottom that they're on, and then the twig ends are out, and then at the top they switch to have the leaves out to shed the rain. This is Paul Hand's donkeys in Lentwardine, England, and this is a white willow pollard that I got to help prune, which did not take long because it's so accessible. And he's doing just a little bit at a time and leaving the younger growth. And it seems to be working okay. Sometimes people cut them all at once, but he's trying to be gentler. So this is stripped leaf in the early spring. So that last slide was saying that we're entering this animal husbandry in Europe, but my titles are missing because I've got these icons blocking it on my screen. So animal husbandry in Europe. So this is the historic section real quick. So they strip leaves in the spring with their hands, and the trees have dormant buds and leafed out again, kind of like they do when the caterpillars hit. Even the brown-tailed caterpillars let them leaf out a second time afterwards. And I do beech leaves sometimes, and this is actually summer leaves, but I wanted to show you that I have the same medieval bag. Mine is polydacron, and my neighbor who knits lobster trap heads makes them for me. These young women in Sweden in Håkan Slata's doctoral study that has such a great collection of museum pictures. I'm not sure if they're stripping or if they're making little sheaves and dropping them, but we're moving on to the sheaves. Here's a woman making poplar sheaves. Her children look like ghosts, I think, because maybe they moved during the picture. And there's that stack. Here's Lars Grinde I think that's how you say his name, in Norway. And he has been doing this. He has never stopped. He's still doing it his whole life. And he's hanging them up to dry briefly on the trees that he pruned. And then he will bring them in afterwards. And that's in Ingvild Austad and Leif Hauge's book that Ingvild recently sent me, and I'm translating with Yvonne Taylor, who only really knows Swedish, and we're translating Norwegian. So there's a few questions still. These are from Håkon Slotte's book, and these are drying racks that they put the leaves out to dry on the sheaves, but they're kind of packed, and Mashacek in his Austrian book says that there was a slight fermentation that was advantageous for digestibility. So here's at the top 2 of those drying racks, and then they move them into these stacks with the branch ends out and the leaves protected more so they stay greener. And this one has fir boughs on top. The other one that we saw had the leaves outward at the top. And this one I think has maybe fir boughs also, or spruce boughs, I'm sorry. This is our try at one of those racks in 2016 tree fodder seminar. Maple and birch, not my goat's favorites, though sheep really love birch. Maple has some gallic acid issues in the leaves, but not in the bark. So they get live bark all winter, so they're a little spoiled. They devoured it for about 2 minutes, and then pretty much most of that I took to Susan's sheep, who were more appreciative. The middle was green. My pictures don't show the green very well, but the outside looked a little brown. We should have moved it into stacks, but it wasn't a very big one, big rack. This is picked leaf in the north parts of Sweden and Norway and other places, I'm sure. They were snapping off leaves just before leaf drop. And Ingvild says that was to be easier on the trees. So people were doing a lot of hand labor. I mean, all of this is a lot of hand labor, but they were doing it together and everybody was doing it. And people came up the rivers to help, it, you know, crews of people. And so this is where you would store those smaller pieces. So the bark bread is actually for humans, and they would put up to two-thirds bark ground. They'd dry it at 50 degrees Celsius and grind it up and mix it with flour and add cold water, let it sit or knead it, and then let it sit for half an hour and then roll it on a frying pan and bake it, fry it. And but for the animals, they were stripping bark, even with a draw shave in the winter, the ash and the rowan, and the pussy willow, that might be willow, but it was hard to change the slide. We weren't sure about the translation, whether it's bush willows or tree willows or both. But the elm was a big deal. That was what was mostly going into the human bread. And mostly they made broth out of the strips of bark for their animals. So you have the stove going or the fire going, and you have some a big pot there kind of all the time for your family of animals. And the elm also could be cut into 2-inch pieces and boiling water poured on it and soaked for a day to give to the animals. So silage was sometimes from raked leaves and sometimes other ways. And Ingvild was in a study that she sent me years ago that, and then I copied sort of, and we were chipping stuff to make silage, which worked quite well. Though it has a higher wood content, not quite as nutritious. This is raked sweet chestnut leaves in Mashacek's Austrian book, and that was for hogs. And the guy's got a watering can. He's increasing the, because when you rake leaves, sometimes they're a little too dry. This is my hand snapped birch, and oh, it smells so aromatic when you open them. That it can be in a bag or a barrel or a bucket or a silo of any sort, or a heap on the ground that's big enough like that, and then cover it. This guy was actually in Norway in Ingvild's book, demonstrating how to do rake leaves for animal bedding, but in Mashacek's book, they said they raked in the spring for bedding, and that makes more sense. You have the carbonaceous stuff that's already inoculated with fungi in order to fix the urine properly, to catch the nitrogen. But I love this basket, and if I dried those, I know the animals would eat them and it wouldn't stay as bedding, and it might be a little too high nitrogen for bedding. So that was my thoughts, but I put him in there anyway because he looks so great with that basket. And twigs with buds. So in the later part of the winter, they would go out and cut twigs with buds, especially certain ones that make big buds in the spring. We cut buds all winter because my goats also eat the bark off of the red maple and various things. You'll see a list later when we get to the browse section. And my cow gets them first. She just gets the buds and twigs, but she eats with her tongue and can't eat the bark. This is Norway spruce for bedding in Mashacek's Austrian book. And Helen Reed in England, who visited 8 countries, says that sometimes some places the peasants climbed with spikes. So they were climbing sometimes 200 feet trees. And with conifers, you have to leave at least 1/3 of the greenery. You always have to gauge the energy of your trees and interact with them and know what they can take and what is good for them. So I'm not sure if he's going to go down the whole tree like that, or if he's just going to leave a section of the tree. But my animals really like eating Norway maple, so it wouldn't stay that much around as the bedding. Nutrition. Steve Gabriel just sent out his final report, or just posted, I guess. I looked it up. And he reminds us that when you do nutritional testing, it's highly site and season specific. A tree, even next to another tree on a different microsite, will be different, and whether it's healthy or not, et cetera, et cetera. The worst species on the best site might be more tasty than the best species on the worst site. So, and they dealt with these 6 species, and 3 of them are illegal in Maine, but we do get to use them some. We don't, my invasives aren't invading much. So I wish I had more black locust. I have 2 of each. And he says that the buckthorn also, the black locust is a nitrogen fixer, so you would expect high crude protein. The buckthorn is the thing that keeps us alive at my farm through all of these droughts, and is like the first choice when we go on other people's land. And so I was not surprised to see that that's also especially high protein. But there's a thing about the protein. So here's my study from using the stuff from my 2018 SARE grant. UVA gave me a little tiny grant to do some nutritional testing. And so these were tops of trees that were like 60 years old. So when you cut younger stuff, it's higher protein. So ours was a little lower than Steve's. But we also measured some ADICP, that's acid detergent insoluble. So they're trying to mimic digestion and see the portion that's not digestible. And there's a higher proportion not digestible in some leaf matter than in grass. So it does pull your proteins down a little bit. But the tree matter was way better than the grass products in non-fabric carbohydrates. That's like the insides of the cells, the juicy part that has all the good nutrition, and higher relative feed value. And high in minerals, everybody finds that they're high in minerals, and they vary by species. And these 3 minerals had different species associated. I can look at my notes later if you want to know more. I'm not sure if I put it in the handout. I should add it to that handout if I didn't. So here's our shredded silage and chipped silage on the left, and on the right is what my goats left of it. So you have this, and then you're left with that. You have this, and then you're left with that. The goats pick out the big pieces. So with goats, it's more advantageous to make big pieces. So they have more big pieces to pick out. With the cows, they would eat the whole thing if you did it fine, but they can't really deal with this stuff as well. But you lose about 20 to 40% of the nutrition, except for the minerals are sometimes higher with the wood included. Strangely, maybe it's in the bark. And some of that is even beyond what they could possibly use of minerals. So we want to be able to make hand-stripped quality stuff, but as efficiently as the chipper. So Carl Hallen at State University of New York and I are working on, he's working on it. I'm just egging him on, and I brought him a lot of cheese. And we're waiting to see if we get a farmer grant. So this piece isn't going to be there, and there's a different feed system dragging the brush through, but these 2 cylinders are going to be there with the flails turning towards each other, and you drag the brush through, and the leaves go down into this barrel, and the brush continues on into the chipper that's on the PTO of the tractor, so that you have your bedding chips separate. And then we would have really intense ensiled stuff without the time commitment of hand stripping. So we're hopeful about that. But meanwhile, on a simpler note, if you want to just go back to the idea of drying, but not have the whole village helping to make all those beautiful sheaves and piles and stacks, Jackson Regenerational Farm stood theirs up when we did our SARE grant. I had mine horizontal and I liked their way better. With the butts down, you can put the whole leafy branch up against a post and wrap a rope around after you get a good layer, and then wrap another rope around the next day when you add another layer, and then you wrap your tarps around. And then when you feed it out, it's all out of their feet and tied with the rope, so you just unwrap part of it and they don't trample it and poop on it and everything. And then you bring the animals over there to feed it, because that way you don't have to carry it and have it shatter. Some species shatter more than others. Or if you have barn space, this is in Mashotchek, this is an Austrian farmer, putting them to dry on top of his loose hay. And here's Sai Schatz's loose hay. He says he layers it right in sometimes, and that he can even get away with a little slight bit moister loose hay if he layers some twiggy matter in there. And then Elliot at Meadowsweet Farm has all kinds of barn space because he's not making his own hay and he's using the plastic wrapped ones. So he just brings his leaf matter right in to dry in the barn. And so here's what we do at our farm each season. I'm not going to do all the seasons, but I made a few slides to give you an idea. And there's more, there's all the seasons in your handout that you will get afterwards. So twigs and young bark, red maple and apple trees are big staples for us. This is Bendito, our first calf last year, eating cedar. This is the goats eating maple bark. This is the cow eating some of that beautiful hand ensiled stuff. And here it is. You've got the Norway maple is really bright green, and the oak is fairly green as well. And then the red maple they like almost as well as the Norway maple. It's a different color, but, and then the willow does not stay so green, but it's so tasty and even to people. And each one has this amazing aroma that isn't the fermentation. It's actually the aromatic compounds coming off of the leaves. But when you trap it in a container, then humans can smell it. The animals can smell it right from the tree, I think. So take some leaves this summer and stick them in a baggie and then open it 2 days later and just put your nose in. So this is my cow with some hemlock. She eats all the needles off, but not very much. She wants some of it. And that's how the cow is versus the goats eat quite a bit, unless it's a 1 year, 2 years in a row it was drought and they didn't touch hemlock. I think it got a little too tanniny over the border for them, but this year it's a staple. And there's me pruning maple last year. I was doing tall trees last year, and the cow was around the goat yard and she was getting first dibs on some of the buds. And all my animals have to learn, watch out, go, 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 watch out. And then they run. And then I say, it's okay. And they come racing back and snap, 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 eating the stuff. So this is that same yard last year. I end up with a lot of brush. And all these tall trees are pruned now. And the cows on the outside and the pigs in there with the goats in the house to the right. She had her own kind of little fence in there. This is what my friend Gabrielle did. She actually pollarded maples to make this garden fence, but we could take, I'm going to go back to the other slide. We could take that and remove the cattle panels that are around and move them to the next fence for the next winter, and take that brush all and make a new wattle fence. And that way I can plant my annuals and biennials where they've kind of bared the ground with all their poop and hay over the winter. I tend to do that anyway, kind of have a rotation of something with the fence still there as the ground recovers and regrows into pasture again. So this is my yard this year. Maybe I have to make my screen lighter for you folks. I have it dim because my eyes are really photosensitive. So we're in the woods this year. We're walking back and forth. We have like a nighttime yard close to the house and a daytime yard out there, and where I'm cutting. And I bought a pole chainsaw. It's 9 feet long. It does this. But these ones were just before I got the pole chainsaw. So I was climbing, and now there's a big area. You want light, so you have to do whole areas. Otherwise the sprouts don't last and don't do well. And my goats would just about live on maple bark, but they are also killing the little spruce trees. So I don't want their yard in the whole place that I'm cutting. I just put it in one place, and these I cut them down and gave them the rest of it because they were killing them anyway. A few little beautiful spruce trees that were in there. Early spring, we have certain things that they only eat when they have frozen and then gotten sweet. And so when the snow goes, there's certain things that are special. Here's your Christmas fern. We have two evergreen ferns, Christmas fern and common wood fern. All the other ferns come back up in the spring and die over the winter as far as their greenery. This is partridge berry. That's also one of those things that they really don't touch much in the summer. And this is my Norway spruce that got kind of spiny when I pruned it. Not as droopy looking as, not as graceful as that other picture in Austria. And this is them eating acorns in April. There were so many that the squirrels didn't get them. I think maybe that was 2017. So mid-spring, suddenly Canada lilies and beech really jump out at us. The sensitive fern is just beginning. That with the buckthorn become our real staples all summer. But the beech and Canada lilies are where it's at once they come out. And this is the lettucey leaves in May of beech. This is just the beginning of June, and then suddenly there comes a day and the cows and the goats and the rabbits all stop eating them. But the pigs, this is lettucey leaves, but they will eat them in the summer. They seem to want those tannins. And there's Tulip eating her beech leaves. She comes too sometimes. And there she is with Canada lilies. And usually they're single leaves, sparse spaced in shady parts of the woods, and they're all over my woods. But this happens to be in the clear cut where there's just happens to be a really lush little bunch there. And she's ignoring everything else, and she's only there to eat Canada lilies. They're like candy. And depending on the rain, affects whether they're there all summer or not. But she will drop everything she's doing and run and eat a fungusy bunch of these are old turkey tails actually. We're up in the front flood zone. So sometimes I offer her things because she's in a paddock and she's not getting the rotation like the goats are right now. And she does have some trees in there. And she can't strip bark like the goats can, but I thought, well, maybe she wants to eat it if I strip it, because I spun a fir pole to make a ladder, and she sniffed it. And then the next day it was actually gone. So maybe I should do some more. And that I knew that the goats eat fir bark, so it's not a danger. But if you're bringing them something that you don't know for sure, don't bring them a lot. And I put plant toxin mistakes by your animals are more likely if you offer them your mistake in a stall or a paddock with limited food choices. So normally they're out there and they're balancing plants against each other, and they can eat all the poisons in the right small amounts balanced with the other things. And they really know what they're doing if they have experience and lots of choices. I've had people call me who brought white hellebore, which is highly poisonous, that the goats just walk by and don't even look at in the woods, but they ate it in the stall, and one goat was almost died, but made it through. So if you take browse walks, they can show you what they want at a given season, and then you know what to cut. That's Elliot, who was a great intern in 2017, and that's mulberry. And they're actually, everybody else is still eating Christmas ferns in this picture, but mulberry had filled up. Time to compose and design and mend. And you can bring your whole office on a goat walk or a cow walk or a sheep herding. I do all my grant reports, my grant proposals, my data management, everything. I made this hat, my visor on a goat walk, and my fence clips all got made on goat walks. I'm mating Wildaustead mittens on a goat walk. So Murray and Provenza wrote The Art and Science of Shepherding. And in France, they had this big campaign, use fences, save time, use fences. And they got everyone to rotationally graze. And then the landscape beyond the fences all fell apart and was less biodiverse and less rich. And then they made 5 herding schools and got everyone herding again. So, and Murray and Provenza say that the animals eat 1/3 more when they're out with the shepherd than when they have the ideal diet in the stall. And they eat more than when they rotationally graze, by quite a bit, which means more milk, more meat, more growth, and more happiness. I put the happiness part. And I think that transfers into the milk. There's endorphins that go into the milk and into the meat. Plus you're out there and you're happy too. So this is Gemson, and she knows how to eat this little fur that's in the shade by eating the side branches. And 9 times out of 10, they leave these dominant buds at the top. The plants know how to tell the grazing animals which part to eat. They put anti-feeding chemicals in the parts they don't want eaten, and they respond to the browsing. And Ingvild Austad's book says that they know which species of animals eating them, and they respond accordingly. And they also send out a stream of chemicals into the air so that the animals know before even coming by the plant. And then the other plants of the same sort read those chemicals through the air and they defend themselves even though they were not yet bitten. So there's this whole interaction that happens. And I believe there's also energetic, I know there's radio waves that can be measured from living things. So there's probably other communications that we don't even yet know. But they really are fast at knowing exactly which plant and which part. These are poplars in my demo plot that the poplars didn't do well for the pollarding because they had tiny tops, and then they came up, they stayed alive through roots, and I'm hoping to establish young ones. And I was glad to see that the goats really want the side leaves and don't lop them off at the top too often. Of course, if you fenced it, they'd obliterate everything. So it's key to let them do their natural movement when they're in the woods, so that they do the right thing. Occasionally, though, they do this to a plant that he's just demolishing that barberry plant, and all of them attacked that one barberry plant. I don't know what it was on that was so tasty as far as the soil or what, but sometimes I'll have to put a brush around something. And so I don't have enough invasives, and even I have 3 pieces of property. One's the blueberry field and one my son was to support my son, and the others don't have goats, but I don't really have the invasives invading. I just have like 1 or 2 of each species, I think, because we haven't had much disturbance. So they don't always invade. And so I have to go and get my invasives from other places where they've done more disturbance. And so this is from the co-housing. It's very lush barberry, and that's cut. And I brought it to them and they love it. And I saved some for tea, and it has barberin also, which is anti-infection, same medicine as in gold thread. This is bittersweet, which mine are like 8 inches tall, and I think I have 3 of them for the last 20 years. And this next one is multiflora rose from my friend Glendon's organic dairy farm, and it's tied as a bundle, and then I have it up against a post, and they ate all the leaves out, and it was down at the bottom on the ground by the end, and with just the stems. And then my friend Rose can make baskets because she can snap the thorns off sideways, and you end up with this beautiful smooth basket material that's quite strong. This is the mangers that I used to make, that I still can occasionally make. If anyone wants to copy my state-of-the-art design, this is goat stripped brush. It was actually maple brush, and these are little fir trees that I cleared. And this is poplar boards that are 1/2 inch. And basically the idea is you can feed them small stuff that you snap off, or hay, and you can move it so that you end up with a nice coat of manure and urine without it all being in one place. And also the leftovers end up kind of mulching more evenly. And these bags you can also move around, especially if you have different trees to hang them from all through your pastures and paddocks. Or you can use this tripod. So this is 3 poles tied together, and then I screwed some boards across the bottom. And that way I can have my bale of leafy branches. And if you leave them tied, and they eat the leaves out of the middle anyway, because they're so good with their noses, the cow sometimes needs it opened up, but the goats can really get in there. Then you have your armloads all ready to throw on the biochar burn. If you do a really fast burn and throw armloads on continuously, and then right at the end, once the last bundle is charred, you douse it. And the middle is not burning, only the outside layer is burning because it sucks oxygen so fast when you burn so fast that it snuffs itself out in the middle, such that sometimes there's a blade of green grass at the bottom still, or a pine cone that didn't burn, and you end up with this big heap. So that's our winter's brush there. And then when I douse it, I do end up spreading it into a flat pile to look for the heat and make sure it's out. And then the goats will grind it up for you if you want it ground for your garden, because they're happy to not be white goats for the first week after I burn. And the cow will do the same. I think it's good for their skin parasites maybe. And then if you want to put seeds in it after you've doused and it's moist, or if it rains enough, I put some chicory and clover in that same spot, and that persisted for years. It's still there actually, and it was really an oasis in all the droughts we had. And they loved it, and I ate it each time I walked by. This is more leafy branches, and I'm using their barn pines, which are pollards in my paddocks that happened to be there, and so I pollarded them about 8 years ago. I can also put that bunch horizontally through the branches, and they can reach it. It's handy way to feed them in the shade in the hot summer. And this is in winter. I went up there because I neglected last summer when I was feeding these tops to them. I forgot to take pictures, but they were stripping all the bark off of 7-inch things in August. I think usually it would be in late spring that the pines grow, but I always thought they were winter fodder, and they never really ate much, and they ate just a little bit of the needles and maybe a little bit of the bark, but it's really a serious summer fodder. I didn't know. They've been telling me by scraping the trunks, but I'm really thick and it takes me years for my goats to teach me something. So, and this is the tops, but the tops were huge and heavy. They were like these big round things. You can see if I cut that next one off, it's going to be a big round thing all connected together, very full of sap. And so it's really key to have them near where you're feeding, or right there where the goats can get them when you drop them. And so on the subject of, so now we're on the subject of smaller, efficient little trees that you can just harvest easily and not climb like crazy Shana, and which is actually rather fun, and it's always nice and cool up there and out of the bugs. But it's really wonderful to be able to just put up a little tiny short wooden ladder and cut everything all at once. So this is Paul Hen's 2 black poplars, both planted at the same time. They might even be the same clone from the arbor tree. This one's definitely from the arbor tree. I think they both might be. And the arbor tree got they sprouted a new one from the same stock, but they got rid of the one that was there that had died, and he ended up with the log. So this one was cut every 3 years. So he lopped it off as when it got that high, and then, or maybe size of a wine bottle or a woman's lower arm is what they say in Europe. In any case, after that, he did it every 3 years, so it doesn't get to grow very much. And so it has really tight growth rings. This one he just let grow. And then a few years back, maybe 5 years before this picture, he lopped things off, and he gets so much more from that tree, and it's like twice the diameter of girth. It doesn't look that way because it's in the distance. So he gets so much more. But this one will live longer. These ones used to live, well, there's 800-year-old ones at Castle Morton that are like 15 feet wide that are like this. So, and if you had crops under it, you'd want those short ones. So this is by my pond, and these are short, accessible pollards, but they're all kind of packed together just in a wild craziness. And I just pollarded what was there. And I've cut them a few times. This is one by my pond by my house, and I used it as an example in my grant year of 2018. So I had felled this tree up high, but they never sprout well. The maples don't sprout if you just do a big trunk cut, but it already had this sprout that I knew would be a new tree. And then I developed that a little. I made a few cuts before this, but I never tried to have it make balls. Machoptic says you wait 15 years. And then I harvested it in the winter for the goats because they like the bark and the buds better than the leaves. And then this is the next year. I actually had just pruned off the interior growth to get it to focus its energy where the balls are going to be. And so that's 1 year growth on that same tree. This is Babette at Why Not Farm at my friend Susan Littlefield's farm. The three of us were there for the tree fodder seminar, and she's cutting an ash tree, and that's a short ladder. And there's what we did in an hour and a half, the three of us. And Susan did quite a few loads like that other times, and her sheep are in really good shape. She has like 12 sheep eating so well. And she put that into barrels, some of it as silage. I left her barrels and in trade for making a lot of cheese for me. And she also puts it on top of her hay bales because she makes her hay and has a big barn. And this is a David Delas picture drawing from France, and the blue and the letters are mine, but the picture in the middle is his, and maybe NOFA New Hampshire needs me to take this slide out because it's copyrighted. Trees belong in fields. Trees belong everywhere possible. They feed the ground. Ingrid says she's a biologist in Norway. She says they pull up moisture for the plants, for the ground layer, and the root dieback. When the little root hairs rot, they release nitrogen to the ground layer, and she says they didn't have to manure the fields. The leaf drop and the root dieback was enough to cut one cut of hay each year for 100 years, just with having the trees there all through the fields. So the best fertilizer is the footprint of the farmer. It's my foot. Those are some of my goats a while back, quite a few years ago. I'm pruning an ash tree. I dropped ash to them. They're eating ash, but there's a maple tree in between. And here's my thanks to the trees and the animals and the people who have helped. And how did we do on time?
Great.
Let's see. Stop share. How do we do on the time?
Good. We have about 17 minutes for questions.
Oh, shoot. I went 3 minutes over.
It's
okay,
perfect.
so let's start the questions. And that's strange. I have my thing over the video light, but I guess the video is next to the video light. So I guess I don't need that light. Maybe. Yeah, it's the same. Good. I can block the light and you can still see me. I didn't know you could see me. I wasn't looking the right way. Sorry. I hope
It's okay.
I hope you all minimized me on your screen because now I'm embarrassed.
No, you were very small, so we couldn't really see you.
I'm very small in real life, actually.
It looks like Ellen has a question. Ellen, you can unmute.
So do I click on her to do her hand, or are you doing that?
She can
She can just unmute herself and talk.
Shana, I just want to know, you said you had some light sensitivity, so is it easier for me to keep my picture off, or will
Well, there's already other people with them, so, and you're small, so it's okay.
Okay.
If you want to be visible, and I'm dimming you way down.
Okay, I just
Thanks for asking.
So I just think this was the most fascinating, amazing presentation, and not just the presentation part, but what you're doing is, like, I can only say it's right or correct versus, like the whole feedlot situation. So that's, like such a juxtaposition. What I'd like to ask is, do you ever do any grain or any grass at all with your animals, or is it like 100%?
Yeah, so grass is important, and I should have had that in my talk. I'm not sure where that went, but I have one reference, and I can't even think which one it is, that it's not one of these books that has the leaf fodder, but it's a more mainstream scientific article that says they can eat more tree matter if they have access to grass or hay. Because of balancing all those tannins and anthocyanins, the more things they have to choose from, the more they can eat. So they can actually eat more tree matter if they do have a paddock of grass than if they don't. If they only had tree matter, they actually eat less of it than if they have grass too. So I rotate grass paddocks all summer, and then we're out wandering part of the time. And when they come home at night, or when they come home when I'm done with them wandering, they're coming back to a new paddock each day. Or, well, depending on the droughts and whether the grass is growing, whether there's anything there.
I have a little
But I never
follow-up.
feed, I don't feed hay. I generally don't feed hay in the summer, and I have never fed them grains in their life, these particular goats, though years ago I had a goat that did get a little grain at the beginning of my goat. I used to grow rye. Yep. But they do get acorns. When there's an acorn year, I sometimes even put in barrels. So, and they do pick like sedge seeds themselves when we're wandering. So, you know, there's grain, but there's no bought grain in my farm.
Just wanted to follow up real quickly. How, in terms of scale, you know, I don't, you know, we would never want 500.
Right.
You know, I don't
Yeah,
think-
that's a really
We
good
wouldn't want to
question.
take care of 500. And I guess I wanted to also ask is, do you teach on farm workshops and seminar kind of stuff? And I'm looking forward to your book from your personal perspective about this system.
Yeah.
And like what you know, experience on that emotional, psychological, you know, just what it's like on a daily basis. Throw that out there.
Oh my gosh, there's so much there. Yeah. So come visit me anytime. I had been doing tree fodder seminars each July, whatever week has the 10th in it, because that way I remember. That happens to be my birthday. So, but I wasn't sure if I was going to do it this year because it's getting where blueberry season is earlier and earlier, and I don't have a good window in between. But I might do it. I had one person already email me interested. If 3 more people email me interested, then I'm going to say, yes, we're going to do it this July. But I'm also happy to do, you know, personal tutorial if you want to take a trip almost any time, because I'll just put you to work part of the time. And I accept woofers, and some of them are really awesome and actually help. And other ones, they kind of balance out for the teaching time. And, you know, teaching is important to me. Let's see, what else did you ask? So scale wise, so if I have 8 goats or more, there's the danger of 3 of them splitting off. I don't have a dog at the other end of the herd. When the French folks or Norwegians or anybody that has herding going on take their 300 animals, they usually have a dog backing up one end of the herd and kind of backing up them to keep groups from splitting off. And that's probably an oversimplification. And the other piece of it is, so last summer, for the first time, I had 8 all summer, and they overgrazed a bit, and it depends on the weather. We had a really dry spring. It was so dry over the winter that there was powder in the soil first thing in the spring, and it didn't start raining till the end of July. And then we had a lush second half of the summer, and it was awesome. But I could definitely see the impact difference of 8 goats versus 6 goats with us wandering our territories. And we had to go a little further to be gentle on the landscape. And that's where the person comes in. You're the mediator, and you can notice if they're killing things that they might want to not kill. And there was a third piece to your question, or did I hit it all?
You got to write a book.
Yeah, the book's going to be a really long goat walk. But I've written a lot of articles, and some of them are at the website, which will be on your handout that Laura's going to email out to you or something, or post.
Thank you so much.
Are there other questions?
I had a couple of questions just leading off what Ellen was just asking. I have some goats at home, 4 goats, and I was just curious, or it wasn't quite clear. So when they're out foraging in the woods, they're not fenced in at all, right? You're there with them, sort of monitoring. Did I get that right? Is that how you manage that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then you had mentioned.
And sometimes, though, I will say I lose them because
Yeah.
I get immersed in what I'm doing sometimes.
Okay.
And someone usually will be like, Matt, Shana, I'm here, and I'll show you where they went. And then if I don't listen to that one, then I might lose them, and then I might waste 2 hours having to catch up with them somewhere.
Okay.
But,
I was
but the
just
thing is, we
curious.
know each other so well, I can usually guess where they went.
Yep. Okay.
And we know
But they
the
don't.
landscape. They know the landscape really well, and I do too, from all these years.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering, and how often do you stay out with them when you're doing that? Are you out there for hours with them?
It depends
Or,
on
okay,
the year, the season, what
yeah,
projects I have. If I'm doing a grant proposal, I'm out there a
mhm,
lot because I might as well be out there
yeah,
typing.
yep, yep,
If I have pruning to go to in the winter, well, and
mhm,
mostly in the winter, I'm more cutting stuff for them. So they might go to where I'm cutting. This year I
mhm,
have a fence out there and a fence. This is the first year with 2 fences. 2 years
okay,
ago, they were just going with me and sometimes getting tied next to whatever brush I cut.
no
And then
fun.
the in-between year, I put them where I was pruning. And so they just
Mm,
had one fence and they were landed there for the winter. So they hardly went out the last year's winter.
okay,
So it varies, but in the summer, and it also varies by whether we have grass growth because, we had like 4 droughts in 5 years, and then we had 1 year where it rained okay, and then we had another drought,
mm,
and the soil microbes are like half dead.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
when we have a drought, there's a higher impact now. I
mhm,
think maybe it recovered some this second half of the year when it really rained a lot.
interesting.
But in those series of droughts, by the third one, it was getting really where we kind of had to wander all the time because
Mm,
I'm committed to my milk CSA folks that it's going to be all fresh greenery in
yeah,
their milk.
that's awesome.
And
Yeah,
so I
and
just find more things to do, and I'm happy to be out there. In a
yeah,
really buggy year, can be pretty awful.
okay. Yeah, and you said on, what was it, you were looking at doing an on-site class or workshop and something on July 10th? That was your
Oh, so
birthday?
it would be, so I
Mm,
usually do it for like a week or 5 days, and people kind
okay,
of stay here. And
okay,
um, COVID wise, so it's always a tiny
mm,
group of people, and I have a big house, and if I don't have any tenants, then there's like
I
separate
get you.
rooms for everybody,
Yeah.
or people bring tents too. But it's never been more than like 5 people,
Yep, okay.
because it's kind of an obscure subject,
Mm,
and
mhm.
sometimes it's been just the 5 most amazing people you could ever imagine, and then sometimes it's been like one person.
Yep, okay.
So, or people come and go from the community too. So I always put it in
Mhm,
the local paper. So people that are around here just will come for certain pieces of it. And I usually get some really exciting people that I want to connect with to come do like a 4-hour thing. We
mhm.
did an online thing with Jan Pokorny in Czechoslovakia about climate and plant transpiration this past
Mm,
one. And that's actually recorded. I could send it to people.
oh, that's great.
And we had Kevin Smith come, who's a plant physiologist who hung out with Alex Shigo, who wrote the best pruning books and
Mhm.
used to dissect trees scientifically and really changed the world of pruning for us.
Mm,
And Kevin he lives in Portland, but he came for a whole 4-hour workshop with us last summer.
wow, wow,
I
that's
learned so
amazing.
much about tree physiology and pruning, and he learned about pollards more. He'd already knew quite a bit. He visited Europe and
Oh,
learned a
that's
bit about
great.
pollards.
Yeah,
So
well,
he
that's
and
what
I
we're
have an
hoping
ongoing
to.
conversation now to figure out more about what really goes
Mhm.
on inside the trees when we
Well,
do this.
that's great. It's inspirational. I have a small goat herd, and this is how I'd like to, have them feed. So it's great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
they'll suck you in, and they remember 8,000 years of people being with them 100% of the time.
Wow,
They're like,
that's
you're not
amazing.
supposed to leave. Oh,
Yeah,
one
they're
thing,
fun.
one thing I didn't
Mhm.
mention, so that machine that Carl Hallen is working on,
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
so originally I put in a novel approaches because I have friends at Lucas Tree. I befriended the owner of Lucas Tree, that's the biggest power line clearing contractor in Maine.
Mhm.
And they cut the places that they prune, they do 5-year cycles, which is the perfect pruning cycle for pollards for fodder. Ingvild
Okay.
Austad says in Norway they considered 5 years to be sustainable for the trees, and their climate is similar to ours. In
Mm,
Nepal, they can cut them like 3 times a year because
mm,
the growth rate is incredible. Um,
mm.
so our hope was to then fit such a machine into the power line clearing along the roads,
Oh,
and
yeah.
have them making fodder while they're harvesting all those wood chips.
Oh, that's great.
So that's kind of like down the road if we can get it to work on the kind of farm scale.
Mhm.
And I don't really want the machine. Carl, are you here? I want the machine, but I'm not going to really use it at my farm. I'm going to use it at Mofka on their
Mm,
hedgerows where I do contract chainsawing for them. And, you know,
Mm,
I want it for other farms that want efficiency and the modern world, you know, but I'm
Mhm.
probably just going to keep doing what I'm doing
that's
myself.
amazing.
In the family, in the medieval family is, you know, family equals like many species. You have a family of animals and trees. So I'm talking too much. So
No, I love it. It's great.
I haven't heard from the other people. Does anyone have any thoughts to offer or curiosities? Does anyone want to tell me about their fodder or browse experiences on your farm?
And
I'd love to hear what people are doing.
while people are thinking about that, if you could drop your emails in the chat, Shauna would like to connect with you all.
That's
and
right.
then we can send them to her afterwards. So,
And I will say that I'm really available by phone, and it will be, all my contacts are in the handout, and it's voicemail, and you have to say your name and your number, but I call back. And if you say what's good times to call, I'll try to call you then. But I love to talk about this stuff, and I always return calls. The email isn't as good to reach me, but it would be great if people want to be on a list in case I send something out about the tree fodder seminar or something else like that. I actually have someone that helps. My email doesn't even have a way to make a list, but somebody else who came once does that for me, and then I bring her milk and blueberries. So, so if you want to be on an email list, Laura will collect them from the chat if you put your email there. And if you want to actually connect, it's actually great to call my phone and leave your number.
and that number is also in our program guide. It's listed.
Okay, that's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
And how do you get the program guide? I should get that.
It is a PDF. I can send you the link.
Great. So are people mostly goat people out there, or there's some cattle people and sheep people? Here, how about raise of hands? Who has cattle? You have both. Okay. And of course, I probably can't see all of you. There's only like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's like a dozen showing on my screen.
Yep.
Is there a way to have it where it shows everybody? Like, yeah.
I think, yeah, there's 11 people here now. So,
Oh, okay. Yep.
so
So they are showing.
yeah.
And who has sheep? Nobody. That's unusual. And does anyone have llamas or alpacas? Nope. I haven't really heard as much from llamas and alpacas. As far as what their, choices are about leaves. In my grant, I went to cattle, sheep, and hogs. Well, my hogs and goats. So, well,
Great.
we've got 1 minute, and I guess we actually fit.
Yeah, so it's perfect. Do
The
you
picture, by the way, is my milk cow being an ox. She was hauling my firewood last year quite regularly, and then she runs to the kitchen door and wants an apple. And the last time I did it, she ran to the kitchen door and got an apple, and then she ran around to the cellar door because now she knows all the places for apples. And I said, no, that's too much. And then I brought her back to her paddock and brought her a whole half a bucket of apples.
That is so funny. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Do you have anything else to add before we close?
Yes.
I have a neighbor that leases out her goats, and so I could pass this information on to her, and I'm sure we can all think of someone that we know that does power line, with their sheep or whatever. So I'm going to spread the information. You're up in Maine, correct? So we got to get you down to New Hampshire to do more of these presentations. Your talk was great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I was there twice. I was there in 2015 and I think 2019 maybe for NOFA, New Hampshire, to give talks.
Got to keep you coming.
Yeah, it's nice in person because then I bring you the ensiled leaves and you get to smell them and taste them.
Cool.
That's the thing that's
Mhm.
missing on the computer.
Television.
Quite the same. Great. Well, thank you. This concludes our workshop. And Shauna, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us.
And
thanks.
Laura's here and she's been backing me up.
Yes,
for the
thank you, Laura,
technology.
too. So Amy's clapping, I see. Our next session starts at 3 o'clock, and that is why New Hampshire needs food hubs, food co-ops, and more organic growers. That's part of our Northeast Food Security panel discussion series. And in a moment, I will pop the links in the chat. Please support our conference exhibitors by checking out our virtual Green Market Fair and conference bookstore hosted by Main Street Bookends. And in case you're joining us for the first time, please mark your calendars for our upcoming programs. We have a Farm Bill listening session on February 17th at noon. Our Feeding the Family Organic Gardening series starts on February 22nd, and there are 6 sessions held every other week through May 3rd. And also check out our bulk order program to save on farming and gardening supplies. The order deadline is at the end of this month, February 28th, with pickup on March 19th and 20th in Andover, New Hampshire, Ware, and Rochester. And thanks again for joining us.